Hello everybody. So today I want to talk about 5 Bitcoin stocks, 5 stocks that hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet and also generate a yield, a Bitcoin yield. And I have worked on this new spreadsheet. It's available on my Patreon. It's going to be updated. It's going to be expanded. I've worked on this new spreadsheet where I try to figure out what the fair price for each of these companies should be, knowing that they are slightly different. MicroStrategy and Semler, of course, they are operating companies. MicroStrategy is a business intelligence software company. Semler is QuantaFlow. That's a healthcare device company. But they have both implemented a Bitcoin treasury strategy where they issue debt, they issue common, and the debt and the common goes towards buying Bitcoin. Marathon, CleanSpark and RIOT, of course, are Bitcoin miners. CleanSpark and RIOT are pure play Bitcoin miners. Marathon happens to be a Bitcoin miner that also has a treasury strategy and has issued convertible debt to start buying Bitcoin and implementing the MicroStrategy playbook. Although I do want to point out that whether it's CLSK or RIOT, when you dilute your stock to pay for the electricity to mine the Bitcoin, you are implementing somewhat of a similar strategy. It's just that the debt goes towards financing your operations, which then generate Bitcoin. So it's not as direct as raising debt to buy Bitcoin, but it's nonetheless a somewhat similar strategy. So let me walk you through the spreadsheet here. So we have the stock price. That's the current stock price as of Friday night. We have the 52-week performance. So you can see the apex predator of all of the Bitcoin stocks is MicroStrategy, up 700%. You can see all of the other ones have just dwarfed. I mean, there's almost no return compared to MSTR. Note how RIOT really hasn't performed very much over the past 52 weeks. CleanSpark, it's often commented as being a stock that doesn't move. It's actually done pretty well over 52 weeks. So has Mara. Semler has done a little better than the market. They've definitely benefited from that Bitcoin strategy, knowing that they don't mine any Bitcoin, right? They're a healthcare device company. You have the market cap right here. That's very usual. I'm going to be using the market cap is here because I'm not going to take into account the debt for the sake of simplicity. And that's really only for simplicity, because if you start including the debt, I'll never be done with this spreadsheet. So for the sake of simplicity with market cap here, I'm assuming that any debts contracted by the firms above is assumed to be canceled out by either current or future dilution, i.e. they will dilute in the future to pay off the debt. That's how the convertible bonds work. Or by the value of the operating enterprise. For example, MicroStrategy, you notice I didn't add any value for their $1 billion software business, but that's roughly the business. So that should cancel out some of the debt. And the cash flow of the operating enterprise and or the negative rates earned by the convertible debt. In the future, I believe many of these stocks will be able to issue negative coupon debt. And so that could pay some of their prior coupons and the prior debt that they've issued. So I'm just assuming that it is taken care of, and I'm just holding its constant and holding it out of analysis, which is why I focus on market cap. And it's a big deal because on this channel I usually don't focus on market cap, but in this case I focus on market cap. Let me move on. We have Bitcoin. So Bitcoin as a count of Bitcoin, right? So you can see MicroStrategy owns 331,000 Bitcoins. You can see Mara is the second biggest, then followed by RIOT, by CleanSpark, and by Semler. That's how many Bitcoins they have on the balance sheet. The net asset value, what's the value of the Bitcoin today for each of these? So it's the Bitcoin times, of course, the price of Bitcoin. So you can see MicroStrategy has $32.5 billion worth of Bitcoin. And you can see that all the other ones have way less. Mara has a notable 2.5 billion. Then Bitcoin as a percentage of market cap. So MicroStrategy is actually not doing that bad here. It's 38%. 38% of the market cap of MicroStrategy is made up of Bitcoin. It is really not that bad. It's of course trading at a premium. So that's the next column for you. Market cap over Bitcoin NAV. That's how many times the NAV is it trading at. So MicroStrategy is trading at 2.6 times the market cap on the balance sheet. That's the premium to the NAV. And you can see as far as premium to NAV, it is the cheapest stock out of the 5 that I present today. And now I try to predict the price. What's the price going to be? What should the price be where the market cap to NAV, right, the price to net asset value of these companies, if it were to expand, where should it be? And it's noteworthy to note, I've compared MicroStrategy multiple times as a Bitcoin bank. If you look at a Bitcoin bank like a JP Morgan, it's trading a little above a 2 in a price to book. What should the multiple be? Should the multiple be closer to a tech firm? A tech firm, you take an Amazon or Microsoft, they're trading at 60 times NAV. What should the multiple be? Well, let me be boring and very conservative and tell you that the multiple should be maybe 5x or 7x to NAV. Maybe, more than a fiat bank, but way less than a big tech. So that's super conservative. So if you assumed that the market cap to Bitcoin NAV ratio moved from 2.6 to a 5, that would be for MicroStrategy $804 a year, for $804 a share. If you were to assume that it were to move from 2.6 to a 7 times NAV, what if MicroStrategy traded at 7 times NAV? It would be a little more than $1,100, and so you can see all of these stocks. Feel free to pause the video and look at what they would be trading at. What would the stock price be if they traded at 5x or 7x NAV? And you can see there's some upside built into Semler, into Mara, quite a bit. There's lesser upside from an NAV expansion standpoint in pure play miners like CleanSpark and RIOT. The biggest upside here is obviously MicroStrategy on this one. It's crazy when you compare it in a spreadsheet to think that MicroStrategy is actually perhaps the least valued, the most undervalued of these plays. Pretty crazy. No financial advice, of course. It's hard to believe for myself. But even then, let me move on. So MicroStrategy, Michael Saylor, right, he's told us, we should be valued at a multiple of a Bitcoin yield, So, of course, they do financial arbitrage. How do they generate that yield? How does MicroStrategy or Semler generate that yield? Well, in the early days, they would just take the cash flows of the business and put it into Bitcoin, and Semler does that much more than MicroStrategy, by the way. But now, much of that cash flow that the operating business generates goes towards servicing the debts that they took to acquire more Bitcoin. Therefore, that Bitcoin yield is mostly generated between the difference in dilution, so dilution of the number of shares outstanding, versus Bitcoin acquired. So, in a nutshell, if you are going to acquire 50% Bitcoin and you only dilute your shareholders by 10%, you've achieved a Bitcoin yield of 40%. So it's the difference between the dilution and the Bitcoin bag growth. How much have they been able to grow the pie of Bitcoin? And how much more than the dilution have they been able to grow that pie? And that is what they define as the Bitcoin yield, as accretive dilution. It's worth diluting if you're going to be growing the pie of Bitcoin much faster than the dilution itself. And they've communicated on those, and I've extrapolated and calculated wherever possible the trailing 12-month Bitcoin yield, the Bitcoin yield over the past 12 months. For MicroStrategy, that's been 42%. For Semler, this is extrapolated, of course, but for Semler, it has been 37%. Mara, 35%. These are actually mostly telegraphed by the companies. Now, for CleanSpark and RIOT, I had to fully extrapolate those and kind of make a few discretionary judgments here. So feel free, if you want to recreate this spreadsheet on your own, feel free to use your own Bitcoin yield. The moral of the story is that we're well into the double digits. It's the Bitcoin yield on average for these companies has been roughly 40% on average. Is the Bitcoin yield that you can see here. Kudos to CleanSpark, that an outstanding yield. So I take that yield, right, and that yield is on the NAV, right, on the Bitcoin NAV. So of course 42%. That's what they've been able to make on the $30 to $32 billion bag. So. You back that out, you calculate 13 billion. So 13 billion of the yield of MicroStrategy is 13 billion off of the 32 billion. Of course, that's very theoretical, and it's especially theoretical because there's no guarantee that they're going to do 42% next year. In fact, I don't think they're going to do 32% next year at all. But that's also why in my price target, I use 15 times Bitcoin yield and 30 times Bitcoin yield, and not what big tech is trading at, right? Big tech can be traded at 90, at 100, but that's because we kind of, we don't have the volatility for the yield. These companies are going to have great volatility on the yield. And if you follow MicroStrategy, for example, you know that Semler has guided only a 10% Bitcoin yield for the next few years. And so I think they're going to do much more than that. But there's no guarantee they're going to be able to continue doing 50% Bitcoin yield. Anyways, I ramble. Let me show you the calculation here. So they've achieved a yield, they've generated $13.62 billion worth of Bitcoin by playing the game of the convertible debt versus the dilution, and playing the accretive delta, the accretive game between the two, and getting all of these convertible bonds oversubscribed, etc. So they've generated $13.62 billion. The company is worth $85 billion. So the market cap to the Bitcoin yield in dollar right now for MicroStrategy is 6.28. It is trading at 6.28 times the value of the past 12-month Bitcoin yield in dollars. So it's trading like a failing auto company with a bunch of dealerships. It's trading like a GM. Should it really deserve to trade at a 6x? And you know, that's the key to this question. So should it trade at what back in the day we used to consider a fair price to earnings ratio? 15 times price to earnings ratio used to be considered a fair price to earnings ratio back in the day. So if we were to apply 15 times the Bitcoin yield, right now the stock price of MicroStrategy should be at $1,000 if we were to assume 15 times. If we were to assume 30 times, right, logically you should be at $2,016 very logically, because you're doing a 30x. And so feel free to calculate, you know, if you want to go crazy and say, oh, it should be trading at 60 times the Bitcoin yield, then you get to $4,000 of a price target, which is absolutely not what I'm saying. Actually, I think 1,000 and 2,000 is too optimistic. I much prefer the 5x NAV view of calculating these stocks. And, you know, to me, yeah, it would make sense that it trades at perhaps a higher, more expanded premium to NAV. A 5, and that would still be half of what the price to NAV has been in the past. I think much of the price expansion is going to come from the NAV expansion. But if we get enough analysts that start modeling the company like this, and if more and more YouTubers, you know, not just me, but if we all start thinking, okay, look, that's the yield that they generate. Okay, so they grew the bag by 13 billion this year. That's what the Bitcoin was generated as 13 billion. So it should trade at the market multiple. And you were to apply the market multiple. I think the market multiple is right near 30x. Well, if you were to do that, yeah, there would be almost a 5x upside in that case if the MicroStrategy share should be valued at $2,000. I'm not trying to send opium at all. This is not what I'm saying, but this is what my spreadsheet is saying. And so you feel free to do a print screen, pause the video, go for my calculations, and figure out which of these 4 rows you think is a credible price target. And you may also assume that the market cap to Bitcoin NAV or the market cap to Bitcoin yield is going to compress, is going to reduce. And if it reduces, well, then the shorts would be right. And then that means that these companies should not be trading at such a premium to Bitcoin. I don't believe that is the case because they are operating companies. I believe there should be a premium to Bitcoin if you're an operating company. But the key, and this is going to be a discussion in the market for the next few years, I believe the key is going to be figuring out which ratio is a fair ratio for these companies. And I don't know it myself. I'm just enjoying the ride and enjoying the gains. And I believe that companies like Marathan, that was a major strategic move that they did, to just issue convertible debt to buy Bitcoin the market's loving this very much, and I believe that if CleanSpark, if RIOT, if more miners do that, the market's going to love this very much, because it is easier to understand than to understand dilution, to pay for mining rigs, to pay for the electric bills, to then mine the Bitcoin when the Bitcoin is added to the balance sheet. You gotta do much more explaining to Wall Street if you tell them, oh, I dilute to pay the bills, which then generate the Bitcoin at a discount. It's a much more convoluted path to getting to a Bitcoin yield than just saying, oh, I just dilute to buy the Bitcoin, which is an easy path, easy to understand. You take advantage of the premium in the stock price to issue shares at a very high price and dilute accretively, and then turn around right away and buy more Bitcoin. So this is a black hole. This all fits into my black hole theory as to why these companies are sucking capital out of a bond market through their bond issuance. For the case of MicroStrategy, out of the common stock market as well, right? Especially if they get added to the NASDAQ. Feel free to look at the spreadsheet. It's available in my main spreadsheet on Patreon as well, and I will be expanding this spreadsheet. Get ready for more videos where I expand this spreadsheet and try to calculate more price targets for different stocks. This was not financial advice, not investment advice. Let me know if you liked this video. Hoping you were entertained. Please like, please subscribe, please follow me on X, please follow me on Patreon. Thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.